People believe in the Avengers. Your differences are your greatest superpower. No matter how bad things get, you always come together. Aren't you gonna say the thing?
What?
Avengers assemble.
Welcome back to Retro Rebound. In today's video, we are going back to Marvel Avengers. This one has been years in the making, and I only have one fond memory with this game, and it's that my boy Josh, who's editing this video, this is when we started working together, and now here he is doing all the video work on Retro Rebound. Small beginnings, that.
But I'm so fucking suck.
So today, the Retro Alliance continues. Over on Retro Rewind, we just did our retrospective for Spider-Man 2 from the Raimi trilogy. And to keep that Marvel goodness going in a handshake across two channels, we're talking about Marvel's Avengers from Square Enix and Crystal Dynamics today. If you want to check out that Spider-Man 2 retrospective, I'll have it linked down below. Let's keep the Alliance thriving. But ladies and gentlemen, this is a game I covered a lot over on my Mr. Matty channel. When I first heard the word of Square Enix and Avengers, me being foolish thought of cel-shaded art style, turn-based RPG. Oh, are they gonna make a Marvel JRPG? I was so excited just by the name and the partnership. And, well, you know what we got. So, to get things started, I want to get into the history of Marvel Avengers. Not the big screen Avengers, the actual game Avengers. To set all of that up, we have a write-in here from Midnight. You can write in over on patreon.com/retrorevive like he did here. Did this game deserve the hate? That's my question. Okay, so let's roll back the clocks. This game was first teased in 2017, revealed gameplay in 2019, and released in 2020, marking it as a synchronization of many of today's sore spots in gaming. In some cases, it was fair to say it was actually the start. It was the gouging of popular IP for live service catch. It was slinging a developer not properly built to do live service into a live service game. Certainly not the first to do that. You think of something like Anthem with BioWare, typically an RPG developer. So this wasn't the first of its kind, but you're starting to see it all align and come together under one game. Last but certainly not least, the uglification of games really began here, in my opinion, with B-tier appearances of characters compared to their, at the time, extremely relevant big screen counterparts. You see something like Tony Stark in game, and you see how relevant things are right now with the Avengers in Endgame, and yeah, it was a pretty bad storm over there for Crystal Dynamics where people were going, why? Of course, money, likenesses, you gotta pay out for that sort of thing, and I'm sure the price for all of the MCU was extremely high, but certainly we could have done better in this. What's funny is many of these things I see in this game now, I'm so used to them being a problem in many other games that I look at Avengers in a much more positive light. We'll get into that, but still, a little more history. Developed by Crystal Dynamics, the team behind the recent Tomb Raider games, there was every reason to think this game had a chance to succeed upon its announcement, but unfortunately, it was in that fateful 2019 gameplay showcase that it was extremely clear something was off about the project, and it wasn't just the visuals. It wasn't until the closed beta and the really weird promotions like Verizon Wireless skins and 5 Gum promotions that something began to signal that this was doomed from the start. Now, upon its final release in 2020, it was a cratering loss for Square Enix. How bad was it, might you ask? They sold off the developer pretty soon after to recover on those losses, most likely. So, yeah, that bad. In fact, I would go to the length of saying it was so bad, it wasn't just Crystal Dynamics, but all of Square Enix's Western divisions got sold off to the Embracer Group as they focused on their Japanese divisions. And I guess you could say after Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, kind of paid off. The game was ripped to shreds online, as I'm sure you're all aware, for its clear deviation from being a core single-player product to a forced live service experience, and it probably could have made some sort of recovery, but it was also released, as I mentioned, in 2020, right in the middle of a pandemic where developers were still figuring out how to develop things remotely, and while everyone was in a really bad position there, particularly when it came to game development, the toughest part was live service. Figuring that all out, so many games just went into complete stasis, and if you had a rough launch that required a lot of patching before content additions like Avengers, you were in a really bad place. Official support for the game would end September 30th, 2023, with Winter Soldier being the last real meaningful addition to the game in November of 2022. However, going back to it in 2024 symbolized two things for me. Number one, how do I word this? Let's not be eloquent. Games are getting worse in many instances. At the time, this kind of game was unacceptable. People were freaking out, and I think for good reason. But I ended up having so much fun with the game on my return. Now, that's not to discredit the game, as it has more redeeming qualities after all of its massive updates, so it definitely did something right. But look, there's just no denying that after slogging through garbage, like, in my opinion, at least, you may disagree, Gotham Knights, Suicide Squad, hindsight has been very, very kind to Marvel's Avengers, where I look at those three in a group, and I think Marvel Avengers is way better than those two games, and I'm not even a live service guy. Except that's kind of the thing. This is the best of the bad. So that's number one. Number two, it's fascinating to see the state of this game now because it took removing literally every bad decision made that worked against the game that made it redeemable now in the first place, because it's what fans always wanted. If you haven't checked it out since its launch, you're actually going to find a story with full expansions and multiple new arcs, multiple new heroes to play as, all of the skins unlocked, all of the monetization completely gone, the best loot in the game's just flying your way, the grind is completely gone. It's just an online Marvel game with a ton of playable characters and no monetization. It's kind of great now. It's unbelievable. So to answer the question at the top, does it deserve the hate? At launch, 100%. And I was right there leading that army with a ton of my coverage. I did beta previews, news pieces, final reviews. I put my hours into this game, but I can't lie. I went to this video thinking 2 hours, 3 hours, and that turned into like 6, 7, 8. I put way more time into this game in my return than I ever expected. So kudos to Crystal. After all this time, I was gone for 3-4 years. They've actually added some pretty nice stuff here, such as the heroes. You have Black Panther, Hawkeye, well, 2 different Hawkeyes, we'll get into that later, Spider-Man if you're on PlayStation, Jane Foster's Thor, you have Winter Soldier, on top of the original cast of Captain America, Black Widow, Ms. Marvel, Iron Man, Thor, Hulk, and a lot of these characters play differently. Now, certain characters reuse significant parts of the kit. I'd say Winter Soldier is the biggest victim of that. I will also say, and this has nothing to do, believe it or not, with Insomniac Spider-Man, Spider-Man feels horrible in this game. Horrible. One more time for emphasis. Horrible in this game. Look, I know Insomniac has spoiled us, but like even Fortnite Spider-Man feels better than this dude getting around. There was actually a question we got from the audience from Mike Poe, who asked me what I think about the added flight mechanics for certain characters like Iron Man or Thor versus the non-flying heroes like Black Widow or Hulk. And I gotta say that there is a clear advantage toward the heroes that can fly. When I was playing as Iron Man and zipping around, I had that aha moment that felt really good where I went, wait, they kind of cooked in this game for a little bit. And like these flying heroes feel great. Getting around as Iron Man, getting around as Thor, like these heroes feel good. But then you go to someone like Spider-Man or Winter Soldier and the ugly parts of the game pop out where it just doesn't feel as good to get around. Like holding the X button and barely web swinging onto a light post, or in many cases in this game, doing the old Raimi Spider-Man web swinging into the sky and attaching it to the wrist of Jesus Christ. Like it's just unbelievable here how much of a difference there are between the flying heroes and the non-flying heroes. But there are great feeling grounded ones. I think Black Panther in particular feels really good. He's fluid, hits like a bus, by the way. And then you also got Hawkeye. If I had to pick a favorite new addition, hey, look, Kate, you're my girl, man. Wait, what? Kate Bishop is my girl. The katana, the mobility, the abilities, the ranged weapon options, like she feels really natural to play, and I think it kind of makes sense. Take Kate Bishop and put her side by side with any of the recent Tomb Raider games from Crystal Dynamics, and you'll see, oh, like the melee is kind of there. Oh, the bow and arrow, that's all Lara Croft in that entire trilogy. Okay, it's starting to come together here why she feels so right in this game, but also like her melee just has a fluidity that works well, kind of like Captain America. He has the best feeling close to free flow combat you can probably get in this game, but everyone's got a suite of abilities, and yes, it is a loot game. I will be honest though, I went into this game and I just hopscotched all around the content. I didn't go in a particular order. I didn't really finish every single expansion, as we'll talk about in the added story content, but I hopped between all these expansions, my level scaling scarcely mattered for any of the story content. I just kind of went through it. The loot flew my way. I auto-equipped it, didn't think much about it, invested in the skill tree, gradually leveled things up. Like, it was very much a second thought, an afterthought, which I know is part of the game's original focus, but I think nowadays that's a good thing, because the grind and the senseless loot gathering that was not needed in this game is now exactly where it needs to be. We're just equip, number change, don't think about it, move on with your life, and that's really it. But you can access the core story content very easily without any grinding, any leveling up whatsoever. Like, I loaded into a save file where I had already beat Avengers and hadn't really touched it since its launch, and just hopped into War for Wakanda, which was the last major expansion. And I was able just to play around in that for a while before dipping out and trying out other ones. You can mix and match between all these episodes, but yeah, the new heroes, the new content is great, and best of all, it's just easily accessible. So you can kind of just have this suite of new content and spend tons of hours here, frankly. So Tella74 actually wrote in on Patreon and said that Doctor Strange was teased to be added at the end of War for Wakanda, also asking me what I would like to see added to the game, and if I had a chance. I mean, I know it's not a fit at all, but I'm such a Daredevil fiend, like, just give me an excuse, right? The way he controls, I feel like he may have felt pretty good in this game, so I don't know, he wouldn't have been a fit. Daredevil's not an Avenger to my knowledge, although I haven't read comics in a little bit of time. I'm trying to get back into it, but yeah, I would just throw someone in there that's interesting, right? Like, the game was dying anyway, so why not? Bring in Daredevil, do something crazy, do something out of pocket. But yeah, obviously Doctor Strange would have made the most sense. Flying character would have worked great, but I would have loved to see Daredevil in the game. But the support ended, and almost that was for, I hate to like prey on the downfall here, but like, it was almost for the better, because at that point they flipped the switch. They just gave you everything. You can equip any skin. So what made Spider-Man redeemable was having a huge trench coat on him with his outfit underneath it. It was totally sick. Like, I loved all of the skins here, and by God, there were so many. They were absolutely trying to get every dollar from you if you liked Marvel. I mean, every character had dozens of skins. It was to a point where you could tell the focus on it was so much so that it absolutely took away from any content in the game. As we'll talk about with some of the story editions, some of these are like maybe an hour, sometimes like half an hour, like a couple missions long. It's nothing crazy. It's nothing to write home about. It's really short stuff, but the amount of skins for days, and now they're all available, so it's great. But for anyone who spent money on this game, my condolences, because they gave it all away for free, and now people like me get to come in late and go, hey, not too bad, Square, not too bad, Crystal, how about a rerun? I'm just kidding. Don't do that. Don't do that. We're just going to enjoy the W as it is, okay? So I've mentioned the added story content. This is where it gets really interesting, because I thought there was just the base game, maybe like an episode, and then War for Wakanda. There's a lot more here than I thought there would be. So at the start, you have the base game story, which we're going to talk about here. So it is dubbed Reassembled. It's the bulk of the game. It's following a tragedy during Avengers Day, or A-Day, where San Francisco is destroyed, and many people due to this event are starting to develop superpowers, and so naturally, in a hero feeling bad for themselves fashion, they start to blame themselves, and the Avengers disband. So now you have the incredibly underrated and charming Kamala Khan, who I think thrives in the original parts of this game that were supposed to be single player. You could just tell clear as day, and I thought she was pretty great. So now she's here, basically trying to reassemble the Avengers herself. In fact, starting out this game, the opening chapters will have you really wondering, like, if the planet's gone insane with hating this. Maybe it's not that good, but like, look, it's good enough where you're gonna go, what is all the hate for here? But the problem is when things go left and you've set up the war table and you see the forced multiplayer component kick in. But anyway, at the heart of this plot is AIM, or Advanced Idea Mechanics, where a lead scientist by the name of Tarleton, eventually MODOK, is thought to be responsible for the events of A-Day. So most of your campaign is gathering the evidence, proving to these Avengers, like, hey, you were done wrong here, we can do this, it's not your fault. And so gradually they gather together, they fight with each other a few times, and you end up saving the day. But in typical live service fashion, if Suicide Squad hasn't reminded us of that, it's not over quite yet. Afterwards, you have Taking Aim, which adds the Kate Bishop Hawkeye, the one that I personally prefer, and it's a time-traveling adventure to stop Rappaccini, who is established as the main villain after the credits roll for the first story. And so these next, I would call them 2 episodes, combined with this one, are all of their own little mini story of episodic content that totals out to a handful of hours, but it's kind of entertaining for what it is, and it's nice that you can fire it up and burn through it all and see all the new content pretty quickly without having to wait for it. And it gives it a sense of flow that otherwise you wouldn't have experienced and otherwise been a frustrated live service player that fires it up and goes, wow, a half hour of cutscenes maybe. Well, great, thanks Square, thanks Crystal. Okay, I'm gonna go move on to other games now. Afterwards, there's Future Imperfect. This one is where they lost me. You're wondering now, why are there two Hawkeyes? Well, we have this time traveling thing going on here, but again, this was supported during the pandemic, so I don't know if it was always the plan. It sounds like a Code Red plan, though, to go back-to-back with Hawkeye. Imagine you announce, Hawkeye's our next DLC character. Okay, makes sense. He's in the movies. Cool, like, let's do it. Oh, it's Kate Bishop. Sick. All right. And then, all right, who's our next hero? Get this, it's Hawkeye again. Yeah, it's pretty insane. It's a horrible look for the game. It was its own worst enemy every step of the way, even if narratively there is some sense here. It just, but basically the story revolves around a future Hawkeye making a mistake, teaching the current Hawkeye, team up with the Avengers, avoid this chaotic future. Meanwhile, Cosmic Cube is the conclusion to this arc. I didn't play much of that, but it seems to be the shortest one. And the last one is War for Wakanda. This one I spent a decent amount of time with because it was the biggest one and introduces a new zone to explore in. It definitely, you can feel with the definitive edition, the graphics are getting a little beefed up here. So the PS5 version looking pretty nice, I won't lie. And then also you have a new hub that you can explore, interact with characters here, collect new missions here, upgrade your stuff here. It's all great. And then on top of that, you have a story that invites in Black Panther, as the Avengers and AIM are here because of corrupted vibranium, the core resource here in Wakanda. And what I really liked was seeing that Crossbones was a centerpiece of this. That's something I actually complimented Midnight Suns about. I thought Midnight Suns, it was sick how they just made Crossbones such a big part of that story. I think that game doesn't get enough love for its usage of certain heroes and villains in its story. And I think it's awesome to see Crossbones here again, like just seeing more B-tier characters across heroes and villains be relevant in today's overall superhero media is exciting. And so to see him get some screen time in this expansion was great, even if his boss fights aren't that great. And that's the one thing I remembered is boss fights in this game just aren't good. They just don't feel great. Some of the bigger threats are kind of fun. You just target their weak spots, but some of these other villains you fight, they just still feel terrible. You know what? Almost as terrible as a PlayStation 4 complete in box experience. So why don't we get that out of the way, shall we? Well, when I picked this one up back in 2020, I never imagined that one day I'd be sitting down to do a complete in box experience for Marvel Avengers, like the cover art here, but I gotta say, the thing I hate to see on any box art is internet required. And get this is a multiplayer game, makes sense, but there are single player games that are showing this kind of icon more and more. Hate to see it. Back in the box, we have Kamala Khan here. Love that. The silhouette giving way to her entire costume. I think that's very cool. It says, embrace your powers. In a future with superheroes outlawed, you must reassemble, rebuild, and customize the disbanded Avengers to stop AIM, then defend the Earth from escalating threats on an ongoing basis. You love to hear that. Live service, eh? Play an original Avengers story and assemble online in teams of up to 4 players. Sounds good enough. I will say the assembling of superheroes that have been outlawed is played out for me between Captain America Civil War and Ultimate Alliance 2. I've seen the story enough times, it's not really that fun. So this was third time's not the charm. You have the disc here. You do get some really cool reversible cover art that we'll highlight here. I think this looks really great. I love when games do this, especially because I hate when you just open it. It's got all of the photosensitivity warnings on the inside. So reversible cover art is great. We also have here on the inside some Square Enix members points, promotion for Final Fantasy 14. A little interesting to find that one here. The back is for Final Fantasy 7 Remake, which is available by this point in time. Heck of a year for Square Enix. You released one of the worst live service games ever from any, and also one of the best JRPGs ever. Quite the year. Quite the year. And then here you have a couple other warnings and not fun stuff, but it does make for a package that is feeling mighty complete in the year 2020, where we weren't getting much of that, but that is what you would get in a complete box copy of Marvel Avengers on PS4. Okay, so now we're at the end of all of this, and we're asking ourselves a question. what have we learned with all of this? And we actually have a write-in to support that from Podcast Now, who says that obviously this is one of the biggest long-term impacts of the game is what it did to the live service genre. And do we think we needed a game like this to show how largely not to do it, to scare the industry, because it clearly worked in that favor for Gotham Knights? Yes and no. Clearly, Suicide Squad has now shown us that not scary enough, but I don't know if Suicide Squad's going to be bad enough to stop the next live service attempt. I feel like live service is this unhealthy cycle of continuing to convince yourself, well, we're going to be different this time, even though all stats and logic show you otherwise. Well, look, Avengers failed, and Gotham Knights, which was supposed to be a live service game, and you could tell when you play that game, failed, and then here we have another failure in Suicide Squad, but we're different. We're built different. We have a plan, and that plan's not going to fail because we've just convinced ourselves that's the case. Like, that's how I interpret it. So, yes, there was a lesson learned enough to shift gears for Gotham Knights and maybe give it a leg to stand on. I know a lot of people in our retrospective for Gotham Knights did write in the comments saying, well, I actually kind of enjoy the game, and that's cool. More power to you. But to me, when I smell that live service stink, it's not just a stigma. It does pollute the actual product. When you play Avengers and you play those opening missions as Kamala Khan and you see how it's all structured and what it could have been like versus what it turns into, you realize it was a game going one way and then just hit this fork in the road and off it went into a completely different direction. And you could tell that that ruins the design, the intentions, the story even to some extent. It breaks up the pacing, it feels weird and obtuse, and many games have suffered from that since then. I don't know if we'll ever learn our lesson with live service. We've seen so many clear failures. I think of Anthem. That's another great example of just, hey, we should stay away from this if we're not experienced, but we keep throwing these developers that are not built to make multiplayer live service experience because they haven't hired the talent for it to continue doing so. And so Avengers is just another chapter in that very, very long book. And we'll see if one day people wisen up and try not to go in this direction. People are there for superhero experiences. Just look at Spider-Man 2. People are there and ready to support. I know it's not always going to be gangbusters. Look at Guardians of the Galaxy, a fantastic game that just didn't sell as much as it should have. Funny enough, also from Square Enix. But man, there's a better chance than what you're getting here in Marvel Avengers, in my opinion. I think the only one that stands a chance is the recently announced Marvel Rivals. We'll see in due time what happens, ladies and gentlemen. But that's all I've got for you on Marvel Avengers in 2024. I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts down below, so fire away. And with that, I'll catch you in the next Retro Rebound. Peace